Hey, what you guys are about to see is an episode of Muay Thai Bones that Kevin and I shoot usually on the way back from Chiang Mai after a fight. We talk about all things Muay Thai. If you're a patron, you can subscribe on iTunes to get the audio. If you're not a patron, you can easily become one by clicking on the link in the description, going over there, and you can watch it on YouTube. So hope you guys enjoy it. And usually these are like 3 or 4 hours long because we're driving in the car, and due to a technical issue, we lost the last hour, so Kevin and I were actually just talking to ourselves, but that's okay. That's what this grew out of. So enjoy this slightly shorter version of Muay Thai Bones for this episode.
Welcome to Muay Thai Bones.
Episode 10.
Episode 10, already at 10. If you're just joining us, this is us driving back from Chiang Mai, often in-depth, on-the-road conversations with Sylvie and Kevin on Muay Thai. We try to dive in deep into the psychological, technical, cultural, social ramifications of a Muay Thai pursuit. And try to talk big ideas, the kinds of things that on a road trip like the one we're having, we just go, we've actually been talking for hours on other stuff, right? Isn't it crazy?
Yes.
So we talk like that, we have these big long conversations on our 10-hour drives across Thailand, and the Muay Thai Bones is about inviting you in on our conversations. We don't always agree, but sometimes we do. We're going to share some of the topics that have been coming up in the last week or two, things we've been thinking about, and some of them we haven't even talked about at all. The first one we're going to talk about is how when you're pursuing the transformation of becoming a fighter, whether you actually fight or not, doesn't matter. Like when you're training Muay Thai, you're training like affects and intentions that in the gym that you might not have in your everyday life. You're trying to bring about certain qualities that are maybe buried within yourself or not as emphasized in your daily life. How becoming a fighter transforms you. And what triggered this was a comment that we received that Sylvie might have lost some of her sweetness. Like this is probably from somebody who has followed Sylvie for a long time. You vlog a lot of your personality comes across, and we share a lot of who you are, things you feel. And it was an interesting moment for us to reflect upon the kinds of transformations that are maybe happening to you as a fighter as you try to become more assertive in your fighting style. Training aggression as a kind of like form of self-expression.
Yep.
Right? And for me, in hearing this like loss of sweetness, I actually was like, wow, that's actually a really good sign, because you've worked kind of hard on, I don't know, I would say to me, you're a very sweet person, and from the day I met you, you were sweet. But there is a dimension of your sweetness that is related to your like small, cute female stature, that being sweet, we were talking about this the other day, that sometimes female fighters or women in general get kind of like boxed in on the becoming more and more sweet to be more and more acceptable, and
like being cute.
Being cute, cuteness. And so in some ways your fighter's journey, maybe cute is an interesting way of like talking about this, has been a like transformation away from cute. Cute in being like non-threatening, right? And some of this has been really recent. You've picked up your fight aggression lately, and then got this incredible badass tank girl haircut. that maybe has signaled the loss of sweetness, right? So for me, I don't want to just go on and on all by myself on this. I see this loss of sweetness as actually like, it's great that it's being noticed.
To me, it fits in with what we've said before, which is like the way you do anything is the way you do everything, and how you cannot address things only in the ring. You have to address your whole life, because the way you do things as a fighter is the way you do things in your life, and the things you struggle with as a fighter are the things you're struggling with in your life, and things like this. And it's been a serious struggle to, like, having been raised as a cis woman in the world to and one who's diminutive and small, to like take up space.
Yeah, to literally take up space, right?
And especially in a martial art where like you're trying to be respectful, and so you're often very like deferent. As a woman, you're deferent. Like all of these different things. It's like it is structured to keep you as low as you're coming in.
What is it? What it is structured?
Martial arts, Thai culture, gender, like all these things are not like you should be more assertive. But when you're coming into it essentially under the bottom rope as a woman who's small, and at the time I was younger, and all of these different things, like kind of taking up more space and being more assertive and like, no, I don't want that, and I'm gonna stand here and I'm not gonna like back off just because it's uncomfortable, kind of thing. Like letting situations be uncomfortable instead of just physical discomfort is hard. It's
very interesting, because a lot of the work you've been doing, that I believe you've been doing, is been like trying to occupy more space in the hitting zone. Like one of the problems or hiccups is what we call fighting on the porch, or being on the porch, which is you're kind of standing, unfortunately, at pad holding range, so your opponent can basically like tee off.
Do pad work on you.
They do pad work because that's a repeated range that they practice all time. So if you stand on the porch, you stand at pad work range, their body is like, oh, I recognize that target. And they can just go pop, pop, pop. Even if you're fucking blocking stuff, you want to stand inside pad work range, off inside the porch, inside the front door. That's really hard to do, especially as a Muay Thai fighter. That's where you want to be fighting. And so a lot of the work that you've been doing is just gaining half an inch or a few more seconds inside the hitting zone, spending more time taking up space.
Yeah, but that physical manifestation has an exact replication of an emotional, social situation, which is if you're like, oh, I know how this feels to stand at pad range so I can hit the pad from here. You can be like, oh, I know what that feels like to talk to a woman who's my inferior. And
actually, I'm not quite following.
There are patterns for how you talk to a woman, how you talk to your student, how do you do any of these things. It's like, I'm comfortable with this dynamic. And then you're like, no, I'm going to stand too close.
So if you're, as a woman, you're kind of conditioned to standing at pad work range, like losing out on the power dynamic socially. So to stand inside that range is to upset the rehearsed patterns.
Yeah, and in the same way that literally physically standing too close is uncomfortable for the person you're interacting with, when you change that dynamic range, it's uncomfortable for both of you. And so you have to like re-hammer out your dynamic.
And you have to, and that starts with getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
Or
right?
at least getting brave at being uncomfortable. I don't know that you ever get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Well, David Goggins would argue with you, right?
Yeah, that's the phrase. But if you get comfortable being uncomfortable, you're not uncomfortable anymore. So you have to move that line.
Well, you just keep
shifting.
You keep shifting to. That's his whole. We've talked about Goggins in the last podcast, or two of them ago, I believe. Square One-ism is that anytime you feel comfortable, you're not standing in the right place. You always want to like then gravitate to discomfort.
Yeah.
Like it becomes its own goal.
To keep growing.
And it's a shifting goal, but that's kind of what you're doing as you're trying to take up more space in sparring, on pads, is you're invading the space, right?
Yeah.
And how is that connected to the loss of sweetness? There was a very interesting thing. Sylvie lately, I don't know, the last 3 fights, but you've started watching Fight Girls?
Oh, that was just this last fight.
No, it was the one before too.
Was it well,
yeah.
They were 2 days apart. So
Yeah.
Okay.
But Fight Girls, the Master Toddy, 2006, 2007.
It was the second season.
Second season.
Yeah.
And that you were watching this before your last fight, and Michelle Watterson was on the screen, and she was just cute as a button.
Yeah, she's like 21 years old when they filmed that.
Yeah.
She's very young.
And not a criticism of her in any way, she's just so damn cute. But it caused you to think about how like cuteness is something that kind of like takes over sometimes as a persona.
Yeah, and I don't know, I don't want to pick on Michelle, but there is definitely it's weird to call it a power because it's so submissive, but there is a tool at the disposal of women, and especially small women, that you can use this cuteness and sweetness as a manipulation tool.
Or at least a control tool in order to control the environment,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you had your own, just speaking from my own perspective, you have your own version of that you might not identify with, but you have like a quiet, sweet, sometimes referred to it as Sylvie Mouse.
Yeah, okay.
Unassuming.
I was telling Kevin that if I had been given a task of writing down 10 adjectives to describe myself, sweet would not have been on there, but Sylvie Mouse, I guess.
Sylvie Mouse is pretty cute and sweet, yeah. And so, it's kind of acknowledging that sweetness or cuteness can be a power move.
Yeah.
Or at least a survival mechanism where the power dynamics are not working in your favor. Becoming sweet or cute can actually be good for you, but that does not work in fighting.
Yeah.
Right? Now, we've talked in past podcasts, we've talked about there's 2 ways to go about this. There's the alter persona, where you're sweet and all this in real life, and then you have the but she turns into a beast when she gets in the cage. What a beast, right? That's the alter persona, the alter ego concept of fighting. But you experimented with that, but you've come to the other approach. It's much better, which is, no, what you want to become in the ring, you become that in life.
Yeah, real transformation is much harder than persona acting, I think.
Right. And maybe it feels more rewarding in a certain regard.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? It's like you don't split yourself. You're like, what's hard is that you're like, wow, I would have to give up the advantages of being super sweet and cute much of the time if I'm going to start taking up space in life.
Yeah.
You may basically, and also, is it acceptable to have a fighter, the values of a fighter in real life as a woman?
Yeah. I keep thinking about this quote by Tina Fey or Amy Poehler. Shit. It really could have been either of them, but they're like...
Tina Poehler. Aren't they the same
But they're
person?
like, bitches get shit done. Which is like, if you want to be sweet and cute and liked by everybody, okay, but you're going to be put where your place is. You're going to be designated to a spot.
Yeah.
If you're trying to become something or carve a space for yourself or change what you've been told you are or where you can stand or where you can be or any of those things, the sweetness has to come off the way shine comes off. Like you're getting in there. There's some patina happening in the process of trying to do things that aren't already established as like that's where you sit, that's where you stand.
I'm also interested. I see this like over the last 6 months. You've been going into a different zone of growth personally, in and out of the ring. Do you see, like, what's your experience of this? I see you leveling up in intensity. Would you be like, I know what you're talking about, Kevin? Or you're like, I kind of don't know?
I've definitely felt something that's strong and notable. I don't know that you and I would agree on what it is.
Okay, well, what is it from Sylvie perspective?
I just feel more like I feel my hands on the steering wheel more than I ever have before. I think that I've kind of been like, yeah, okay, I'll trust that we're going in this direction and I'll work hard kind of thing. But now I feel like my hands are on the reins.
And some of this has been you self-directing your growth in the gym, right?
Yeah.
Some of it came about aided by Cara Lowenthal's podcast, right?
Yeah.
Like she has a big thing about, what is it, unfuck your brain?
Unfuck your brain, yeah.
But the idea of like autonomy, like steering yourself, isn't that true?
It's make a fucking decision and then find your peace with it. It doesn't matter which one you make, just make sure that you make it and then make up your mind about it. But I think that sweetness comes with it a large degree of indecision. And it's things that are completely mundane and stupid, like where do you want to eat or what do you want to watch tonight? So I don't know, up to you. You just want to be accommodating.
Yeah.
Accommodating is pretty sweet. Sweet's pretty accommodating, but like
totally.
You can't be accommodating as a fighter. Like you can in some areas.
Well, let me ask you this: in some ways, you're a very accommodating person. What personally does something personally draw you in about becoming an unaccommodating fighter? Like, I always feel like if there's something in Muay Thai that really like twinkles in your eye, that means it speaks to an emotional need within oneself. Do you not feel like this movement in your Muay is reflecting a greater need within yourself? Because I'm interested, like, I think a lot of like cute, sweet women, girls, either age, are drawn to Muay Thai. There's something about the art that feels like a liberating possible transformation. And a little different than boxing or kickboxing or MMA. Like, those are other arts, other transformations. But there seems to be something that speaks to some women about Muay Thai. Maybe the combination of it, artfulness and its violence. Its
actual techniques and structures and properties are good for small-bodied practitioners.
That's a very good point.
But I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but this is something that I'm thinking about.
Okay.
Which is that as a woman, you're kind of conditioned to be like, you're good if you put other people's comfort first. That's like, you don't make people uncomfortable, and not only do you not make them uncomfortable, but you actively work towards their happiness and comfort. That's being a good girl.
Right.
You want to be a good girl, right?
Totally.
The transition that I'm feeling, I think, is this, not necessarily my comfort, but like my satisfaction and my happiness is better for everyone. Like, everyone wins when I'm doing what makes me feel free, rather than anything that I want is actually at odds with other people's comfort and happiness, so I'm gonna like sacrifice my whatever for you.
So what does that vision look like?
It's not a vision.
Well, maybe I choose the wrong word. What is a world in which
Sylvie being free in the ring is not stepping on anyone's toes. Everyone wins by Sylvie being more free in the ring. Like,
okay, what are you referring to? Like, obviously the opponent would lose.
not necessarily. Like, it's not.
I like that.
It's not a like zero-sum game of like when I am free, it means you're restricted or.
Yeah, she might elevate. Your opponent might be elevated by your freedom, or there might be kind of like increased of, I don't know. What am I trying to say?
I don't know. Even if you're like, if you're in the gym and you're like clinching with or sparring with someone who's real tense and tight, there's this. It makes you uncomfortable too, where you're like, there's this weird aggression or discomfort that's like, it's like when someone is pouting and they like fucking pull everyone into the pout with them, and now everyone's unhappy. Whereas like you can kind of be doing your own thing, but it doesn't bother anyone else, and it's like, okay, like, you know, Poot will get over it in 5 minutes kind of thing. But like, me being free in the ring is freeing up that tension or that like self as you're like aggressively trying to muscle through a movement that's like, this is uncomfortable for everyone. Like, the ref doesn't like it, your opponent doesn't like it, the audience maybe sees it or doesn't, but it's like, God, this is a fucking unhappy fighter.
I think in some ways I've seen what you're talking about, like when you have this admiration for Tananchinook, who sometimes pouts in the ring, like when she can't be free, but when she's free and moving in the ring, she's just a beautiful fighter, and you're fighting her, like, but you feel like you're freed in a weird way at times when fighting her. Like, it feels good to fight her, even though when she's like that, she's fighting really well. Tananchinook's a very long time world champion, a couple weight classes over Sylvie.
It's like having an unwilling dance partner. It's not fun.
Totally.
They can be kicking you and beating the shit out of you and hurting you, and if they're free in what they're doing, it feels better than if they don't want to be there also. Like,
it's kind of weird though, because I just realized a logical contradiction, which is like, you're like, oh, the woman is good, the girl is good when other people are elevated or made comfortable, and now you're like, well, I've found a way to be free and to make people comfortable and therefore be a good girl. Like, I thought the adventure or the transformation or the difficulty would be like, how do I get comfortable making other people uncomfortable?
But it's not all one way or the other. Like,
okay.
My happiness does not have to be sacrificed to make someone else happy, and someone else's comfort, happiness does not have to be sacrificed for mine. It's not a like scale that only tips like this.
Right.
It's this realization, this like better for everyone thing, that doesn't mean that there aren't moments or elements that are like, this is going to make people uncomfortable. Someone pointing out you're not as sweet as you used to be has within it a like, this feels different kind of thing. So my assertiveness or my taking up of space or my like not deferring all of the time, there can be different feelings to that. There's a rude version of that, which is like, you're now being an asshole. But there's also a version of that that's kind of like when you're a bartender and
Sylvie was a bartender in her past life.
You can say anything to someone with a smile,
right,
and it feels different.
Okay, but I'm wondering if someone who's grown up nurturing, I'm gonna comfort other people skills, like for fucking 20 years, 25 years, I'm gonna make other people uncomfortable on purpose, is an underdeveloped skill.
Yes.
Like, you wanna be a pressure fighter, you don't make people uncomfortable in 5-second combinations. You make them uncomfortable in 2-minute rounds.
But that's
like the whole round.
That's the difference between dominance and aggression too.
Yeah.
Is like, the first time I was training at Lana, and Big at the time was like punching me in the stomach, and I did not understand this game.
Right.
There's a like, you are making me uncomfortable and you're being a fucking dick thing that's going on. But then later on there's this interpretation that's like, you're dominating and teaching me something and I'm in on it too kind of thing. That's like, I can make my opponent uncomfortable without it being aggressive. It's dominant, but it's not aggressive.
Okay. But don't you think the more successful fighter is dominant and aggressive? Like, I'm not like making you uncomfortable, you're learning a nice lesson, we'll all be friends after it.
I'm not trying to make it seem like it's this win-win-win situation where you're never actually making anyone uncomfortable.
It just feels like you're still uncomfortable with the idea of making somebody fundamentally uncomfortable.
No, I make people very uncomfortable.
Yeah, but I'm just asking you, like, it feels like in your descriptions, you've built quite a wide fence around the idea that improving as a fighter involves being comfortable with really making somebody uncomfortable, like for extended periods of time. Like, we're about to fight a 15-minute fight. This is going to be a miserable 15 minutes for you. As opposed to, I hope I do well, I'm going to close the gap. Like, literally, you're not going to enjoy this experience.
Yeah.
Do you kind of know what I mean? Like, it feels like there's a area of the ground that's still uncovered. Yeah,
well, maybe that's why I'm less sweet and not fucking bitter. Like, I'm
you don't have
shifting.
You don't have to be bitter, though.
I'm shifting on the scale.
You don't have to be bitter. You can just be like, when I'm pressuring, this is what the pressure feels like. Like, it is acute.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. This is one of the interesting things, is that as a fighter, as a female fighter, you're on a trajectory of personal transformation. It's not just acquiring skills and trying to be good and show your training and please your trainers or crews or whatever. It's really about a transformation, exposing yourself to certain feelings and affects, like, that are calling to you.
Yeah.
Like, to become a fighter, something is calling to you, and not the same thing is not calling to everyone.
Yeah, I think that there's a kind of hologram understanding of what kind of transformations you're actually going to undergo.
Okay.
Which is like, we think more or less we're just going to stay fundamentally the same person and like tweak these things. And fighting hasn't made me anything that I wasn't already.
Well, it's interesting. Very many people were surprised by you becoming a fighter, but one person who wasn't was Nell.
Nell's my best friend.
Best friend when you were a little girl.
Yeah.
Like, she saw continuity.
She was like, of course, like, it's like no problem.
But everyone else is like, sweet little Sylvie.
Yeah, I don't know. But what I was saying is that in the transformation, it's muting some parts of you and amplifying other parts. Yeah. It's not a like, I'm gonna build. People think you're building something. You're not building anything. You're like color tweaking and toning and like tinting and all these things.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So
as a
in
witness,
this, like, there's gonna be no fundamental changes in who I am. I'm just gonna be what I was, but like more badass or something. I think people see it as like a makeover movie where like Audrey Hepburn goes to Paris and comes back hot, and she's more or less the same sweet chauffeur's daughter, but now she's super hot, kind of thing. And it's like, it's not like that. Like, there's gonna be a completely different energy coming out of you as a person. Not everyone's gonna love it. Like,
and it reminds me almost like, I don't know why I'm getting the association, but like genes get turned on and turned off in the body. The body can express itself in way different spectrum of capabilities than you currently are at.
Yeah.
And it's like, you have these capabilities, all this huge spectrum of what you are, but who you were 10 years ago, everything was tuned a certain way.
Yeah.
Certain things were tuned down, certain things were tuned up.
Yeah.
your environment probably did a lot of the tuning, but you might have also tuned it yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
And it feels like people who are drawn to fighting, women maybe especially, because culturally women are not fighters, like in the broad brush of femininity, they long to be tuned differently. And another comment, which I thought was really cool, I forgot somebody who was very supportive of you. He's like, you are the first person ever to fight yourself into transformation. He was like, what you're becoming has occurred through literally hundreds of fights. And it's been a process of transformation.
God, that's weird, right? Like people like, what's the word I'm looking for? Exacerbate? What's the word?
I don't know.
To say something that's bigger than it actually is. Hyperbolize.
Exaggerate. Oh, hyperbolize.
People exaggerate or hyperbolize, and they're like, hundreds of hours, like literally hundreds of fights, like multiple hundreds.
Yeah, but I mean,
fights.
a lot of people might train themselves through transformation, but you've literally trained and fought yourself through transformation, and it's just a transformation that's continuing and just even starting. Like, to me, this last 6 months is you're like going to a different level within yourself, and it's a very genuine transformation. I mean, there are like split second reversals where people just like invert themselves, but most of it takes a very long time.
Kevin's been doing reading on what is it called, the like breaking point with the sand, like the sand.
Oh, sand pile and dynamic. I forgot the technical term of it, but it's about network dynamics and how basically dynamic systems operate in a stochastic, chaotic way where when you're dropping sand on a pile, nothing will happen. Then little avalanches will happen, and then suddenly there'll be a big avalanche and a big change.
And this is the kind of like mini transformation, small transformation, almost nothing, slight
Yes.
in a person that you're like, oh, whatever, it's a little bit kind of thing.
Totally.
And then there's just this like avalanche change that's literally overnight kind of thing. Like this fight, suddenly you just totally look different.
Totally. And
you can't predict them.
And if you stopped fighting or stopped dropping grains of sand at a certain point because you're like, well, nothing's really happening, you would never know that an avalanche is waiting. Like an avalanche of change is sitting there.
So like, less sweet killer.
Really not very sweet right now.
Don't talk to me like that, Mom.
If you don't mind me asking, I'm really actually interested, and I haven't even talked to you about this, is your haircut, which is fucking incredible and does feel like, wow, hasn't Sylvie always had that haircut? What is that? It's connected to what we're talking about. What does that haircut speak to you? Like when you see yourself in photographs and in the mirror, and when people are responding to it favorably, like this, it feels like this haircut signaled a change within yourself. Or you're like, what haircut?
I don't know that I have a satisfying answer to that, but it's
something you
I'll
like
catch moments where I'm like, I look like a fucking comic drawing or something, like a comic book.
Well, what does that feel like? That's like a crazy feeling, right?
It's cool. It's like how when you photograph people, they're like, you let me see myself in a very different way. Kevin has this amazing ability to photograph people. But I think there's also this like shedding of something that was like constantly fixing my hair in clinch, or like having it be messed up in a fight, or like whatever the thing is. It's just this kind of like, this isn't as it should be. Like
how your hair used to be.
The constant fixing. It's like constantly writing your skirt or like your glasses or something, and then suddenly this like tick of having to fix something goes away.
Right.
And you just feel resolved.
Okay. But do you disassociate from what you look like? Are you just like, doesn't look like anything to me?
I don't know that I really think that it's weird because it feels like I have always had or always should have had this haircut. Like, it was always there, but like we finally brushed the crap off the top or something.
The overburden.
The overburden.
Well, when you look like a comic book character, what is that? You're not empowered by that? You're not like, more of that?
I don't know. My body has looked like a comic book character for quite a while now, and so it's kind of like when the superhero gets their outfit right, like at the like third act of the movie or something, where they're like, oh, let's change the color, or like Spider-Man's thing is finally like adjusted, and you're like, it really pulls it together.
So it kind of feels like that.
I think so.
So in some ways, this like direction you're heading as a fighter maybe feels that way too. Like now everything is starting to fit, or do you still feel like you're out of your skin a little?
I feel like things are starting to fit, but it's way more of a conscious effort than hair, so it's not quite the same. Like it's.
Well, that's what's exciting to me is that you fought 250 fights now, just fought your 250th fight, and many years now in Thailand. I don't know how long has it been. 7 years. And I swear to God, I'm not exaggerating. You're just now breaking into the virgin ground, like the real development. Like everything feels like it was prelude.
You mean like now we're hitting pay dirt?
Now we're hitting pay dirt, and
just
there's a lot of pay dirt. It's not like a little bit of pay dirt. It's like it took that much to just cover all the ground, to have all the frustration. You're starting to grow eyes as a fighter, and you're starting to identify this
I agree
personal
that
thing.
there's kind of this feeling right now that's like, okay, now we know where to dig, rather than like, we've been chipping away at this thing and blah, blah. It's like, we've been looking for our own asses for like 7 years, and now it's like,
it's just so crazy because people, if you had stopped after 5 years, everybody would have been like, wow, you're amazing, 150 fights in Thailand, nobody's ever done it before. Like, it would have been a perfectly satisfactory stopping point at any point, but you would have never known what's beyond it all. And so I guess what I'm saying is, for everyone thinking about their own transformation, your real transformation might be 2 years from now.
Totally. And I think there's a underestimation of how much you can change. If you ask a 19-year-old how much they think they will have changed by the time they're 26, I think they think not that much. And if you ask a 26-year-old how much they've changed since they were 19, they're like, fuck, like,
totally.
So different. And I think that's true even in your 50s and 60s. Your capacity for change, like where I've come to this point, is nothing compared to the kind of growth and change I can have in another 7 years.
God, I can feel that it's like you finally have crossed the ocean and now you're on the shore and you've just been swimming this whole time, and it all was for good reason. You can't get to that shore.
And now it's time to hike the mountain.
Totally. That's how I feel. So to finish off this segment, what advice would you say to any woman or girl who's really drawn to Muay Thai and fighting, who other people think they're pretty sweet or cute? Like, that's part of their persona, how they move through the world. What advice would you give to that kind of person?
I don't know. I would maybe just go with the like Emerson quote that the only right is that which goes with your constitution and the only wrong is that which goes opposed to it. Is I was told you're losing your sweetness, which within it is being told I was ever sweet. Like, I don't identify with being sweet.
Right.
So as long as I'm not losing myself, it's not a loss, it's just a transition. And I think that becoming more assertive or becoming less sweet or cute or whatever. The thing is, for women, I think is kind of a necessary transition just with age. But within the transition and work of becoming a fighter, maybe just pulls that into a tighter time frame, like the clock is faster.
Well, what would you say is on the other side of cute and sweet? Like, if you can get over to there,
being able to hold the fucking wheel of the car.
Do you want to drive, baby?
No.
Get go. Well, what's that like?
I don't know. It's.
Well, you're just now touching on it, so.
It's hard to describe because you have no alternative reality. It's just how you are, like who you are. There are people who are not sweet from much earlier on, and there are people who become sweet later. So,
Am I stumping you with this
you're
question?
stumping me. I don't know. Like I haven't.
You're on your own road.
I would not have identified that quality as being a big change in myself.
Baby, you know you're Sylvie Mouse.
But when you put it that way,
yeah.
I can see where those transitions and where those changes are.
Totally. Okay. Next subject. We're rolling. Okay. Segment number 2. We're calling this one Easy Fight Sabotage. And the reason why we're doing this is you just experienced this in your last fight, and it's something you felt in past fights, and this is a kind of like pitfall that you can find yourself in as a fighter. So do you want to talk about your last fight, or do you want to talk about it in general? We just thought this would be nice to we haven't really talked about it ourselves.
So I've had few experiences of this, but enough of them that I see the pattern that this is a thing, which is that if I go into a fight with this expectation that it's gonna be easy, like I'm not afraid of the opponent, or I think I know what she does, or
I've faced this opponent before.
Faced her before and I knocked her out before. Like whatever the thing is, going in with this expectation that this is not going to be hard has fucked me in fights, and it's never like a complete reversal from what I thought it was going to be. It's just that when I hit the adversity this is harder than I thought it was going to be, like this is actually hard and I was expecting it not to be hard, it's a serious mental obstacle that I put on myself.
We should point out that you don't feel that way often.
No,
right?
I've had maybe like 4 times out of my 250 that I've had.
Like it's very rare that you're like, okay, this might be easy. Almost always you have like trepidation before a fight.
Yeah.
But you are noticing this other thing. Like in last night's fight, she was bigger than you thought she was going to be. She was bigger than before.
Bigger than last time I fought her, yeah.
And she was just resistant. A lot of times this comes in the clinch when you're like, I can't move this person.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's similar, I think, to there are people who will advise against looking for the knockout because you'll never see it. If you just let it happen, if you just flow and do your thing, you let it happen. It's like how Chai is like, never hit with 100% power because you won't hit anything. Instead, pull it down, be relaxed, and that's where the knockout comes. Pinu says the same. He's like, I've never knocked someone out with a like bah punch. It's always this like letting it kind of flow thing. Is that I think I'm not afraid of this opponent. I knocked her out before. It's not going to be a hard fight, and then it's hard. Creates this tension of like, why is this not happening? It's like looking for the knockout. It's tensing.
When you feel that way, do you feel like, oh, is there something wrong with me? Or what is the chain of thoughts or feelings? Or I wasn't ready to have to use all of my stores? I'm curious. I don't know.
I don't know.
Or is it just a vague, frustrated feeling?
I think it's a vague, frustrated feeling. And I think that there's a disservice that teams and coaches do to their fighters, which is when they tell them, you'll walk through this opponent, you'll win for sure, blah, blah, blah. It's the same. It's putting something in the head that the moment you reach opposition, there's something wrong, rather than like, I expect opposition. Like, oftentimes when I get hit in a fight is when I actually start to go. It's like when I've actually gotten that contact and it's like, okay, this is going to be a fight. This is going to hurt. This is going to be a struggle. When you accept this is going to be a struggle, you stop struggling with the struggle itself and you just go. And I think that it's a self-sabotage on my part to expect the same fight out of a living, breathing person who like does not fight the same 2 times. Like, and
why do you say self-sabotage? Are you undermining yourself?
I'm doing myself
purpose?
a huge disservice by being like, this is not going to be hard. Instead, it should be like, it's always hard, because honestly, it always is. There are no easy fights. And even if, like, 2 of the examples are Nam Tip, who I fought last night, and Hong Tong, who I've fought, I think, 3 times now, maybe 4.
She's like 60 kilos.
This is the thing. They're both very big. Yeah. So even if I knocked them out before, their size alone is an obstacle. Like, I should look at them and be like, this will be hard. And then if there's a knockout, it's like, oh, that's great. But like, when I think about those knockouts, they weren't easy.
No.
When I watched the videos, they weren't like, I'm dominating all the time and then the knockout happens. They were fucking fights, and they were struggles, and then the knockout happens.
And then it happens,
and people know how to adjust to you when they fought you before.
Totally. They know where the danger zones are, so they stay away from the tipping point more readily. Yeah. There was that amazing boxer that I fought in Karchuk twice. I think her name is Pet. Yeah. She, the first time, not an easy win. Maybe it was a draw. Not easy. She's big, she's rangy, all these things, but she had no idea what to expect out of me. Yeah. So I was like, oh, well, I beat her before, or I had this experience with her before, that's what I'll do again. And then she had made adjustments that's like, okay, I don't want her anywhere near me, I'm just gonna box the shit out of her face with my long arms. That is not the same fight that I had before. And that was a very upsetting fight for you.
Yeah, that was a very hard one.
But part of that was that you probably expected you should be able to handle her.
Right.
Fucking, I don't know, did she have 5 kilos on you and she's on the national boxing team? Like, it's kind of crazy sometimes the people you sometimes expect to be able to handle. Yeah. Like, they have many, many advantages built in.
Yeah, she won some kind of WBC regional boxing title like a year after I fought her.
Yeah. So she knew what she was fucking doing. And had size. And whatever. I'm just saying, let me ask you this. You fight a lot, so it's reasonable to expect that you're not the same mentally in every fight. Like, there are going to be times that you're overconfident. There are going to be times you're underconfident. Like, I guess you're saying this is a non-ideal mental state, but it's also one you'd expect yourself to fall into occasionally. Yeah. If you fight a lot.
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe it's kind of natural to deal with nerves, or like, this fight was kind of just thrown upon me out of nowhere. Like, we were going into the venue of fight 249 and Dang was like, hey, can you fight on Friday? And so it's like, okay, now we're fighting on Friday also. That's not weird for me. I take fights on very little notice. I fight back to back all the time. But there are little mental coping mechanisms that are like, yeah, I can do that because that's not going to be a super hard fight. Whereas if it had been like, you're fighting Tanajnog on Friday, like, I don't know how I would have felt about that. I don't know how I would have psyched myself up about that.
Yeah, it's totally, in Thailand, you could totally show up at the venue and you are fighting Tanajnog.
Yeah, regardless
of
who
you're like, it wasn't who we said it was. Yeah. Right? So what is the takeaway about this? Like, one of the things that I noticed that this happens quite often with very big opponents. Not that you're underestimating them, but in general, because you're a clinch fighter and you fight literally up 3, sometimes 4 weight classes, you get very frustrated when you're not able to move them.
Yes.
And I'm like trying to tell you, I've told you after fights, but even during, keep moving them.
Yeah, be patient.
You have to be patient. You can't move them in the first 2 rounds when they're strong.
Yeah.
And they're resisting you with all of their angles and everything. You keep pulling them off the ropes. You keep continuing the clinch exchanges. Don't let the ref break it. And then and I've seen it. By round 4, you're starting to move them.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I guess the part of it is you cannot allow yourself to be dispirited by early failure.
Yeah.
Like that early resistance. You're like, oh, she's just too big. I can't move her. So you stop trying to move her.
Yeah.
And you start doing something else.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if you just keep moving her, like pulling her, turning her, it just starts to open. It's like you crack it open, and once it cracks open, it's way open.
Yeah.
Do you think I'm like, this is a little bit of a side thing? I feel
it's
like it's related a little bit.
Yeah, it's related. It's not quite the same thing, but I think that it's in the same way that you can't predict the way a fight's going to be before the fight. You can't even predict the way the fight's going to be in the first 1 or 2 rounds. Like, a fight has an arc and changes, and you know, trying to push a wheelbarrow that's full of water is not the same thing as having tried to push it for 5 minutes and half of the water has sloshed out. Now you can push it.
Yeah, I'm also, I would say as an outside observer, and I'm pretty attuned to your mental state, you're so hard on yourself, and you're not a super optimistic person often. It surprises me. It surprises
Such
me.
a delicate way.
It's my sweet self. It surprises me to hear that you thought you were going to walk through her a little bit. And how does one balance that? Like, you're kind of a little bit overly pessimistic. You do not give yourself credit a lot of times. How do you try to get yourself to a point of confidence that does not involve expecting things to be easy?
Well, it's what...
Do you know what I mean?
It is
It's like
actually
a weird
false
line.
confidence to think that something's going to be easy. Real confidence is this is going to be hard and I'm going to rise above it. Or this is going to be hard and I'm going to endure it. Or this is going to be hard but I can handle it kind of thing. That's confidence.
Totally.
So like, this is going to be easy. It's not confidence. Like, that's cockiness, or that's hidden self-doubt or something. Like, something being easy is not a sign of your skill or efficiency. Something being manageable or endurable or whatever, those are signs of your skill.
I actually feel a little guilty because I kind of told you were going to walk through her. I don't know if I helped plant that seed, but I didn't mean like it was going to be easy. I could just feel your confidence and your energy was like really well focused, and I'm like, when you have that like momentum rolling, like you had knocked out your opponent in 2 rounds the night before, or 2 nights before, I could just feel like it takes a special fighter to be able to stand up to that energy. So I'm like, I didn't think it was going to be easy. It's just going to be like, that rush of water is going to erode that mountain that's in front of it.
Yeah,
like it's not like eventually. That's kind of what happened.
That's an appropriate narrative.
That's kind of how I felt, but I didn't express it that way.
No,
I was like, I think you're gonna. I don't know what I said.
No, I didn't take what I was feeling from you. I took what I was feeling from my previous experience with her.
So, is there any kind of like large scale thing you want to draw from this?
Just that you're not. It's the same way that people try to take negative thoughts and just plaster a positive thought over it.
You're the best.
That's not real. Like,
yeah.
It's crazy and it's inauthentic, and that's why you don't believe these things, is because you don't believe them. So just repeating something over and over again that you don't believe is not appropriate mental process.
Right.
You cannot boost yourself up by expecting or telling yourself that something's going to be easy. Even if it ends up being easy.
I'm confused a little bit. You're like, but you did boost yourself up by telling yourself it was going to be easy.
But then when it was hard, I was deflated. And it wasn't even that hard. It was harder than I thought it was going to be. It was like just opposition.
Yeah.
Like, that was not an easy fight.
No.
There was no point at which I thought I was going to lose it. I was ahead the entire time, all of these things. But my mental, like, breakdown, which I'm sure was just a minuscule version of what I've had before.
Right.
And you've seen this where you're like, I don't understand why you fucking crumbled against this opponent when it was really close, and it's because mentally you're like watershed.
Yeah.
It's in the same way that you cannot just plaster a positive thought over a negative one. This will be easy, or this will not be hard, is not actual real confidence. So always, like, just acknowledge that there is no easy fight. Even an opponent that you 10 times out of 10 should beat, it's a fight. Like, anything can happen in a fight.
Totally.
Which is why this whole Muay Thai thing, Thais love to say Muay Thai, which literally means you cannot fight someone. So it's like, that person can't fight him, like, can't even fight him. They use it as this toss-off of like, oh, it was so not even close that, like, that person doesn't even belong in the ring with them.
They use it ridiculously.
They do use it ridiculously, and
they said it of Sang Mini when he lost to
Tawan Chai.
Tawan Chai.
And then he killed Tawan Chai.
And they're like, they can't even fight him. He's too big. And then he just came back and like took him apart. And I called that one.
Yes,
Karahat was in the back seat, and Karahat, who's a fucking legend, is like, he can't fight him. He's too small. And I'm like, are you crazy? I knew it. But the Thais use this all the time.
This is the thing. We
cannot fight.
In the West, we love to be like, I already beat that opponent, therefore I always beat that opponent. I'm better than them. Like, I'm up the ladder, and now there's no reason for anything. It's like, there are so many ways to lose. And you can do it to yourself. Like, you can totally just hinder yourself.
So I guess the thing is to go, just to have the mental discipline and the respect to be like, this is going to be a hard fight.
Yeah.
Because it's a fight.
Easy is not good. Overcoming is good. Like,
yeah, totally. And then you bring that in your training too. Oh, I thought I was going to have an easy day at Petron Rung, and no, P-New is like, more burn, Sylvie.
Like, what is that?
Are you ready? Okay, next topic.
Now we're rolling.
Oh man, the land is so beautiful. I wish we could like picture this. Incredible, the sun's going down by the mountains. So this segment, I guess this podcast, in the last episode 9, seemed more about training and technique flow. This one's more about mental. This podcast seems to have more about a theme about like mental, psychological, social dimensions of Muay Thai in Thailand. In this segment, we want to talk about something you've run into, which is really subtle, that you might not, if you don't speak Thai, if you don't really fight the way Sylvie fights, you might not know is a thing in Thailand. How do you want to approach this? Like, do you want to just talk about diesel Muay, or do you know, like, it's a very...
Put your shade down again.
Oh, we're getting some...
Yeah.
Occasionally when Sylvia fights in a very unconventional way, pretty much like no Westerner ever has, she books her own fights almost entirely. It's very traditional in Thailand. Just the gym does your booking. You represent the gym like massages and manages you in a very controlled way. Sylvia has built this other process, and so we're always bumping up against custom and the Thai way of doing things, and we try to always find a respectful way to make people feel like you're taking the right course, even if it's not the usual course.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a weird segue in.
Well, tell me how would you segue in? Cut a different path into the jungle.
Because of my path and my goals and who I am, out of necessity, we've taken a super side road to how things are normally done. And with that come consequences that allow me to be this like kind of unicorn, but then you cannot just be what is the word I'm looking for?
An exception?
Yeah, but you can't just be operating in this vacuum of not like anything else. Like all the cultural values and rules and norms get applied to you kind of in this spastic way. So I fight bigger. It used to be occasionally I was fighting bigger.
Not for a while.
But it's been years that it's just always bigger, and they keep getting bigger. And so there are fighters in the normal Thai run of things, like if you're fighting not in the Bangkok stadia and things like this, where there will be like a weight difference or a size difference, and it's like you get a huge thumbs up if you can beat someone who's bigger, and kind of on these showish.
I kind of don't even know what you're talking about. Like, who are you referring to?
If you're not fighting at Lumpini and Rajadamnern, where there's this rule about the 2 kilos.
Okay.
In like a festival fight or even in Pattaya somewhere, you'll see weight disparities.
Okay.
Especially between Westerners and Thais, but Thais are usually the smaller ones.
Okay. Yeah. You seem to. Okay. I'm not sure what ground you're laying with that.
Basically, there is not a thing that's like you are always the same size, always the same weight all the time. There is a lot of wiggle room in real Muay Thai for weight disparities. The consistency with which my opponents are bigger than me has become this point of, would you call it criticism?
Go for it, baby.
Dieselnut complains about it a lot, and Pinu complains about it. And it's this like, people are taking advantage of you, and like, you shouldn't be fighting these people who are bigger, and all of these things.
This is very weird, because you just prefaced the whole thing by saying there's never equal weight. And now you're like, but they're upset it's not equal weight. The proper preference is there's always equal weight, and if it's just a few kilos on serious fights, it's a big fucking deal.
Yes.
Like, you preface it to sound like weight doesn't matter. Weight matters a lot in Thailand. Like, a lot. If there's a Dernpan...
Thais believe in a very, like, almost crazy way that size always wins.
Like a kilo, half a kilo, a quarter of a kilo.
Which we must believe in the West, too, because we have all this weight-cutting shit.
Totally.
But...
I feel like we're losing the plot
that's crazy
here.
to me
this is hard to talk about, I guess.
The thing that's crazy to me is that I win about 70% of my fights, as Kevin worked out, which is a good rate. And given that my opponents are always bigger, that means I'm beating significantly bigger opponents 70% of the time.
Okay, let me set the picture.
Okay.
Diesel Noi and Pinu, the model of proper Muay Thai is stadium Muay Thai, which is only men.
Yes.
In stadium Muay Thai, there is a rule against how much weight difference there can be. It's only a couple kilos.
2. Like,
okay.
No more than 2. Yeah.
2 kilos. In the golden age, it used to be much bigger.
Yeah.
Like, you'd have elite fighters fighting elite fighters 2 weight classes up.
Yeah.
Like, they eventually passed a rule where it can only be 2 kilos. What the culture of Thai of fighting is largely driven by this stadium model, which is you're always, just like how there's weight cutting craziness in Western fighting, there's always a negotiation on fights about who's giving up weight? How much weight are they giving up? It all has to stay within a certain zone. And the person with the greatest amount of prestige and leverage is the one who gets the weight advantage. Like,
yep.
you get the most favorable outcome when you have the clout, right?
Yeah.
So if you're regularly taking a weight disadvantage, it means that you don't have any weight to swing around. You don't have any authority. So it looks bad to be taking weight disadvantages.
Yeah.
Right? So this is the stadium model, right? And it probably extends itself to Isan Dern Pond fights, like betting fights.
Yeah.
Is that you're constantly jostling for who's going to cut the most weight, and when you have the leverage, you express your social power by the unfairness with which your opponent has to overcome something.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the context of what is normal. What we run into, because you have a path where you just want to fight as much as you can so that you can just get iteration after iteration, the only way for that to happen is for you to fight lots and lots of big fighters.
Yeah.
First of all, there are not even enough fighters your weight. Even if in an ideal world, you wouldn't even have enough opponents to face. Even if you can wave the magic wand. But the truth of the matter is, you have to take a disadvantage in order, which is usually a huge weight disadvantage, in order to actually produce fair fights.
Yeah.
As you said, you're winning about 70, sometimes 80% of your fights. Like out of 10, it's 8 out of 10. So you're actually winning these weight mismatches, right? So they're not mismatches, right?
Right.
But there is a social dimension to matchmaking, and it's actually a very big part of Muay Thai. Matchmaking is where you're kind of in a negotiation, it's almost like gambling, how would you compare this? Like a lawyerly negotiation? That the negotiation for the matchup is almost more important than the actual fight.
Well, you see this in boxing, like the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight. To make that happen, had endless negotiations of who's going to promote it, who gets paid what, which weight is it, what ounce gloves is it going to be, and it's all
but this
like
happens on little tiny fights. Like this is not just the biggest fight of the year. Who's going to make $10 million more dollars?
Flexing of authority.
It's the same thing, but it happens all the time in Thailand Muay Thai.
Yeah.
Like it's a major component of the culture of male stadium and probably Dern Pond fighting.
Yeah.
For that reason, Pinu and Dieselnoy have no idea what Sylvie is doing, taking huge weight disadvantages over and over and over again.
Yep.
They literally cannot comprehend it.
Yep.
And part of the difficulty in taking this path is, how do you even explain this, right?
Yeah.
Like, so that they can kind of get it.
Yeah.
So that's my stage. I'm setting the stage, right? Like, Dieselnoy in the last couple fights has been complaining to you, like, don't fight big, even though you've been winning them, right? Mm-hmm. I need you to be with me. You're just saying yeah over and over. I need you to jump in a little. I'm like cueing you.
The thing that's hard for me is that I am outside of the norm.
Right.
And then the norm is like selectively applied to me. Like, if they were like, okay, all these rules of professional fighting are that you nitpick these things and you don't have the people all over the place, even Kem in Karat, who wants to have Dern Pond fights with me, is like, no more than 2 kilos. Like, everyone has this no more than 2 kilos rule that comes from the Bangkok fights that they just say. And if they were like, yes, because you fight at Lumpini, sure, but I don't. Like, I can't.
No.
And so it feels selectively applied, and I don't know how to respectfully
Disagree.
separate myself from that rule set.
Is that the end on that?
I have an emotional thing with this that I was crying about all morning as we were talking in the car.
Okay.
So I feel like this.
You're gonna have to be honest about this though too. Like,
How am I
like
being
why is
honest?
this a big deal to you? To me, it's not a big deal, but to you, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal because I feel misunderstood by people who are incredibly important to me and who I feel like should be believing in me in this, holy shit, our tiny horse can race against the best of the best, even though it's like a little Seabiscuit horse or whatever. And instead, it's like I'm being criticized for taking disadvantage fights, even though I'm winning.
Yeah.
And so instead of it being a like, good Sylvie, like you're so strong, you're this, which I got when it was sometimes, or when it was like at the beginning.
Right.
And now it's like, no, this is starting to look bad.
But I think part of the reason why it hurts is you're still trying to please your trainers. You're still trying to get the pat on the head. Like, you're still, like, this was the biggest problem forever. What?
That's 1,000,000%, yeah.
Yeah, but you gotta calm that shit down. You've been doing it since Master K.
Yeah.
And it's like, you cannot fight to please your trainers. Like, when we hear other fighters, we're fighters of respect, fighters that fight hard, try hard, to like, I just wanna make my trainer proud and da-da-da. Our red flags go off.
Yeah.
Like, that is not
it's a losing endeavor.
It's a losing endeavor. There's something about that mentality, that drive, which has a ceiling. It has a low ceiling to it.
Especially as a female fighter.
Yeah, and you could get satisfaction by winning the belt and everyone's proud of you. But if you fight long enough, you realize that that can't be the, like,
goal.
The point.
Yeah.
The point of it.
Yeah.
And it's more like, I don't know, there's a certain degree in which what you're doing just cannot be digested by everyone. But fight enough, win enough, for long enough, and everybody will get it in the end.
Yeah, well, this is, when I was crying about this morning, this is something that I brought up to you, is that if you're losing, like, you're losing your fights, you're losing to these disadvantages a lot, you see what's wrong. And so you're like, okay, I see why you disagree with this. I see why that's wrong, is because you're losing or you're getting hurt. Because that's not the case with me, I'm like, what's wrong? Like, why is it wrong?
But you know what's wrong.
I do, but it feels unfair.
It's
feels
unfair.
Like, the world's not fair, people.
Yeah, the world is not fair. There's also the component that we talked a little bit about this before we podcasted, because it's a very big, interesting conversation. The Thai mentality, I was arguing, has the ability to hold two separate thoughts in their mind. They can think that something is inappropriate, which means that's not the way it should be. And then they could also be very excited by the very thing that's inappropriate.
Yeah.
And they kind of agree and disagree with themselves in a weird way.
Well,
So, okay.
we do this too. Like, if you look at this, the whole notion of intergender fights, some people get very excited about it, and those same people can be like, but it's inappropriate.
Do you think? I don't think so. I think
You
in
think
the
those are
West,
different
I
people?
think people are like, Fallon Fogg should not be fighting, but I'm excited to see it. No, I don't think. The Thai actually has the Thai culture seems to me, can split themselves in half. Like, Pinu could be like, oh, it's totally inappropriate for you to fight at Lumpini. Like, oh, female to fight at Lumpini.
Right.
Just not appropriate.
Right.
But could find himself in a position where you're going to fight at Lumpini, and he's like, wow, that's really incredible. Like, let's go do that.
Yeah.
And he could have, like, it's almost like two hemispheres of the brain. And I think, like, that's kind of what goes on with the big size mismatches that you have. It's not, there's a cultural feeling like this is not appropriate in some very weird way. Like, yes, you keep winning, but you keep winning these weirdly inappropriate fights that are not, they're not appropriate because you're taking a big disadvantage. It's a very weird, like, cross wiring.
Yeah.
It's like the disadvantage is too big, but you keep winning.
Yeah.
And I think this is just a stumbling block in just Thai sensibilities about fighting, because we know that what would happen in the Golden Age is Yod Muay would clean out their weight class and then go fight the weight class up, and then sometimes maybe even up above that. And many times, like, Karaha was a fighter who was unbeatable or nearly unbeatable at his weight, but then he would fight some pretty big Yod Muay and he'd lose to them.
Yeah.
And but this kind of like testing yourself up several weight classes is actually in the history of Muay Thai, but maybe it's no longer a living aspect of it.
Yeah. Or it's like kind of misremembered or something.
Yeah, maybe, but it wasn't even that long ago. I mean, there wasn't that big of a weight difference on the scale, but Sanchai was losing to much bigger fighters towards the end of his stadium career.
Yeah, when he fought Yodwicho was much bigger. And like even like Karahat versus Boon Lai, there were 3 of those, and the size difference between those two is like
totally. You see them as like a child and a man. It was like
yeah.
So, I don't know, the larger picture of this is really more about things you run into when you speak Thai and you start to come in contact with the culture itself.
Yeah.
That there's a Muay Thai culture, and maybe we can get into this a little bit. I was saying to you that one of the greatest things about coming to Muay Thai, look at the geese. There's a fucking flock of geese. They're chowing down on grass. One of the most beautiful things about coming to train Muay Thai in Thailand is, as a Westerner, is the argumentative, criticizing social media world of your Western local fight scene, where whatever local is to you.
The fishbowl.
Yeah, it could be the country, it could be the city you're in, is really harsh. Like, it's not fun. The politics of it is not fun. And one of the most beautiful things about coming to Thailand to fight, like to train even, seriously, and then possibly fight, is you come into a culture that's not yours. You don't speak Thai. And Thais are actually pretty good at smiling through most everything at the surface of things. So you really get to like dive into training like full time, not have to go to work, but also you get divorced from a whole sea of criticisms because it's not your culture. You can't hear the way Thais talk about things. Yeah. And there's a huge weight off of your back, I think, to be able to just dive into this passion that you have and just indulge in it in a beautiful way. And I think this is a good thing.
Yeah.
Like, go ahead, baby.
It's also this thing that, like, with greater visibility comes greater pain of criticism and restriction and things like this. Like, when we first came to Petrongrung and asked for Pinu's blessing to, like, book my own fights and go outside of Patti and all this stuff, it's like, no problem kind of thing.
Right.
I was fighting big then, kind of out wherever. And then as I become more visible, as I become more well-known, that part of it that we could close our ears to, that's like, we don't hear the Thai side of it, it just gets more profound, louder because of your visibility. So there's this like pain of visibility that people in the West feel in their, you know, East Coast, West Coast, whatever the thing is if you're from a big gym or not a big gym or whatever the thing is really matters. The longer you stay here, the more recognition I get.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also like you're almost fluent in Thai now. Like you now are connected to the culture. You no longer have that freedom that many people like have, which is they can just come here, and we had for several years where we just fight, train, fight, whatever's happening, whatever people are saying, doesn't matter. I guess what I'm saying is two things. One is, this is a beautiful thing about training and fighting in Thailand, is this huge vacation you get from fucking social, like this whole Muay Thai is all about respect. No, not if you're fucking Thailand. Like if you actually know, no. It's as bad here as it is there. But when you come here, you get to shed all of that. Maybe for a year or 2 years, I don't know how long before you start getting pulled into the culture. But then that's a secondary thing. It's like, now you get to be part of the culture. You start to learn the language. You start to be part of the value systems of your gym. And now you have to negotiate the kind of amphibious nature of being part of the culture and not part of the culture.
Yep.
Are you looking at a warning here?
No.
Oh. Wait, I lost my train of thought.
The amphibious nature of being inside and outside.
And so, honestly, this "you're fighting too big" is not even a huge thing. Like, we're just using it as a, to the left, maybe?
Yeah.
We're using it as a launching point to talk about the kinds of stumbling blocks or aspects of Muay Thai culture that maybe you don't really run into. It's only something that I've been like yapping about for a month or two, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like these kinds of things can come up just from one fucking social media comment. It's
totally.
Just like the West, like talking, right?
Yeah.
I think we covered that. Did you anything missing there?
No, that's good. So that is episode 10 of Muay Thai Bones. You can get all the previous episodes on YouTube for free. And if you are a patron, you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and get those every time they come out. Audio only, very easy to do. When you become a patron, you can just go get an RSS link for yourself. If you're not yet a patron, click on the link in the description below. It's very easy to become one, and besides the Muay Thai Bones podcast, there is over 80 hours of long-form training videos with the legends, crews, and fighters of Thailand, all things that are Muay Thai in Thailand, and just so much stuff you wouldn't even believe. So I suggest you become a patron. Click on the link in the description, and I hope you guys enjoyed both me and Kevin talking rather than just me babbling in the intro and outro.